Hi everybody, this is Hero back with another Dragonflight video. Here we're looking at Sub-Rogue and the proposed draft of the trees coming up in the next expansion. And I want to take a brief look at this tree and talk to you about what I like, some of the concerns I have, and let's get into it. First off, I have covered a lot of the general rogue tree in my assassination video, so if you'd like to look at that video to get more information or some more takes I have. Overall, I'm very glad that they have designed the rogue tree in this way. There are throughput options that are pretty high up in the tree. You know, Tight Spender, Night Stalker, Virulent Plague, Ambush, Deadly Poison. These are all adjusting gameplay from a throughput perspective, and they're not merely utility like Blind, Faint, Numbing Poison, etc., or movement speed. This provides, I think, a good balance between the goals of Mythic Plus people who want certain amounts of utility, but want a lot of flexibility to choose which ones to take and which to ignore, who want PvP people who want, generally speaking, far more control elements in their gameplay, and the throughput stuff is, generally speaking, considered as a secondary to some of these tools. For example, you must have Blind in all PvP scenarios to make any rogue really work for your setups. You're severely gimping your team if you don't have it. But in Mythic Plus, you might think, okay, maybe we don't need Blind for this run, and that changes the way you think about it. Whereas in raiding and the more like Mythic raiding scenarios, some of these tools are thought about in a completely different manner, i.e., maybe you want some of the defensive ones like Feint, but do you really care about Gouge? Unless it's very specific for a boss and somebody else cannot do it with their kit, not really. So that's a great balance. Now, if this occurred all the way down like it does in the Hunter tree until you get past the 20 mark, and it was all just essentially utility pieces and really no throughput questions, the tree would be bad. So I'm glad the tree is in the state it's in. They're bringing back some iconic ideas from Rogue, Cold Blood, Subtlety, and they're bringing forward from this past expansion Echoing Reprimand in the main tree, and they're offering to everybody extra Shadow Dance. So I think that's good direction for Rogue in general, and it will play into how we talk about sub in this video. To the main tree, or the spec tree itself, just a few comments. I think aesthetically, there seems to be a mirroring going on. You can see the zigzagging going back and forth. This might be impeding some of their design ideas here. And what I mean by that principally is if you follow the right side of the tree, you'll notice that basically from Shurikenstorm all the way down, this entire branch is connected. So if you want access all the way to Flagellation, you have to have taken Shurikenstorm, and there's no way to skip past that. There's no little breakpoint where this is a new tier like we have in the Priest tree with Bubble. I believe Barrier is by itself, and you can start from that portion. The same is true, obviously. You have to take Backstab all the way down to gain access, and there's no interlocking. You can, from Stiletto Staccato, grab extra Vanish and more Cloak synergy, but that doesn't translate into more connected points. So the main takeaway for me is that Sub's tree feels like twice as restrictive as Assassinations, and I think Assassinations tree, as far as I can tell, is the most polished version of this large truncated style where we have these yellow and white lines connecting everything up so that it's a really integrated web. Assassination is the best version of that I can see. I would still prefer decoupling in a lot of these talent trees, and I think subs represents a kind of severe mirroring or synthesis of both sides. So Black Powder in our AoE side begins here, but what about access to Dark Brew? What about access to more Eviscerate damage? What about access to more Deeper Stratagem and Flagellation, which tends to be more of a single target oriented piece? Finality as well, even though it affects spenders like Black Powder, is also buffing our Eviscerate. So the person who focuses on backstab stuff, grabs Gloom, makes their way down here to try to gain access to Sepsis or the old legendary, the Rotten, is going to be like, wait a minute, okay, backstab's great, but I'm missing out on spender stuff here, and I don't really care about Shuriken Storm, but I have to take it. It feels bad. I don't really care about spending points on Black Powder. I have to take it, even if I want to get secret techniques. So there are some concerns in my mind about dividing them up so explicitly and forcing right to the very top of the tree these connections. However, I think the ideas that they are bringing into Rogue for the next expansion, Sub-Rogue especially, could be very explosive. Tuning is always the problem, which is why, generally speaking, I think any throughput talent is a really bad idea, just in general. No talent should be merely a throughput talent. They should always be offering some kind of adjustment or change to the way that you play the game. So finality is actually kind of in the middle. It's not the worst version of this. 15 and 30% damage for 6 seconds, and it's tied to a certain kind of outcome, i.e. the next use of the same finisher. So that's okay. There's some ways to play with that. Eviscerate and Black Powder increase your shadow damage dealt by 15% for 8 seconds. Is that interactive? Like, I know it's 1 point, and we're thankful for that, but it's also part of a chain. So this kind of stuff is worrisome, rather than having something that's modifying your gameplay, and there are other paths. The middle portion, again, connecting up to Shadow Dance leads us to what I think is a really interesting idea. Shadow Mist, and I'll just read it. Gaining either Stealth Vanish or Shadow Dance expels a shadowy mist nearby. Walking through this mist refreshes the cooldown of Shadow Step and supercharges a combo point. So supercharging is related, again, to echoing Reprimand. It's not the exact same mechanic, but it's similar idea. Damaging finishing moves that consume the same number of combo points as the supercharge function as if they had 7. So you can kind of double down on this gameplay, the consuming 7, or acting as if it's consuming 7, by heading this way with this tree into Echoing Reprimand, Resounding Clarity, and also into something like Shadow Mist. We haven't had this style from Blizzard, where obviously we haven't had these two trees matched together. You've had the old like TBC system where it's like class and classic, where you have one tree or one set of points to work with, 70 points or whatever, and you pick and choose, and you can only go so far. And then we've had the 7-point talent trees that we know in the modern game. But here, what Blizzard has done that I think is cool for Sub-Rogue is said, hey, if you like the idea of Shadow Dance, you can spec into it. This class operates with Shadow Dance as a baseline idea. Here it is, and you can avoid it if you wanted to. But here's the baseline idea of Shadow Dance. But you can double down on this gameplay, just like you can double down on buffing or modifying your gameplay to account for uses of Shadow Dance and Vanish and Stealth. So if you want double Vanish, if you want Shadow Dance here and Shadow Dance here, then there's a payoff for you at the bottom of the tree. That is really good design, guys. This is how you want to design your game. Give people a flex of options and then say to them, here's a really powerful payoff for indexing into each of these features. So think about in a raid environment or a PvE environment, like Mythic Plus, having access to timings in your mind for Shadow Dance and Vanish, and then resetting them, which is also a means of boosting your damage through Anima Charge. That's a technical element to playing Sub-Rogue. And if the payoff is good, which I hope it would be, and Shadow Mist maybe is the kind of thing that you would have to balance for, maybe it's not strong enough. Maybe they would have to say there's 2 or 3 effects of it. But the point is, it gives the player something to aim for in their gameplay. And I'll tell you, that encourages a lot of DPS players. Knowing that you could play better and play up to a certain kind of standard is a really cool idea for a lot of the player base. Perfecting your craft as a player, making it so that you are the best Sub-Rogue, not just in PvE, like PvP is great too, because you've made use of these tools very effectively. If you're thinking like I think one player, if you ever watch someone like Peekaboo do PvP, he does a lot of twos in arenas, just goofing around, having fun. He's obviously an excellent player in his threes team. One of the things that makes me so delighted to watch Peekaboo, makes me want to pick up and play my rogue, is the amount of skill that he demonstrates utilizing all the various tools, sapping at the right time, knowing when to blind, knowing how to line and how long he needs to line before he can get his stealth back, knowing when his kidney shot DR is going to be enough that he needs to modify his gameplay. These kinds of things. So imagine someone like Peekaboo getting Shadow Mist. And there's a PvE version. There's lots of great rogues rating as well who are probably looking at Shadow Mist and saying, I would love to min-max this, to play to the best of my ability with this kind of style. Now, the question is going to become, can you make a build that's functional, either PvP or PvE, given this bizarre trunk issue of it being segregated so heavily, and still do viable damage? Or are the passive options, or one row or the other, forcing me away from this kind of option? And that's where I would hope Blizzard takes some feedback and says, break down this tree trunk structure so that people feel like they can invest in what you have designed here, which I think is an excellent style of design. Those are my main takeaways for Sub-Rogue. The final thing I want to say is they've also done one other excellent thing, and this is true not just for Sub, but also for Assassination, which we saw last time, and for Outlaw. They're offering Sub-Rogues some version of raid utility. And this actually goes for Mythic Plus as well, since movement speed's great there. We know how valuable WoW has been in this last season. And I'm sure that if the PvP had some extra points over, maybe they would find a use for Shroud of Concealment in their comps. Lots of cool stuff. But from just a Mythic raid perspective, I gotta tell you guys, knowing that you have a Sub-Rogue that is specifically teched into giving you movement speed is the difference between achieving a mechanic, timing, and failing it. Now, we know we have Windrush Totem. Kind of clunky, right? You're dropping it, people get movement speed, but it does work for certain kinds of mechanics, like especially get out of dodge mechanics, like on Jailer, right? When you have to line of sight, everyone's stacked up for a certain kind of tank smash or the CC, and then they have to get out, Windrush Totem, boom, everyone's gone. Roar from Druids, also iconic and excellent. Here, Sub-Rogue just adds another element to it. 50% is a lot of movement speed. So this represents, in my view, the greatest amount of potential movement speed boost for a raid group in the game. And that's a really cool niche to suddenly have. The caveat, of course, is you have to stay within the Shroud of Concealment, which is quite large, but it's different than the function of Roar. It would be really bad if they just said, when you press Shroud of Concealment, all raid members or party members within 40 yards move 50% faster for 10 seconds. They've done the right kind of design, which is to say, no, Rogue's contribution here is going to be matched by the mechanic that it provides. This stealth barrier or shield or circle within which you must stay to continue to receive this buff. So you can't run faster than the Rogue. You're not stuck in one place like the Shamans, and it's not a very brief duration like the Druid's Roar. It's something unto itself. And this is, of course, balanced by the fact that you could be playing Assassination Rogue, or you could be playing Outlaw and providing CDR. All of these things excellent. So I think my overall assessment is that Sub has some work to do in decoupling the tree, but overall the ideas here are the excellent kind of design that players are looking for. Specifically, Shadow Mist ideas like Shrouded in Darkness, the return of things like Thistletea and Cold Blood that really open up opportunities for players to take back some agency in their gameplay and find some cool builds. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys for the next one.